John Wooden is quoted as saying ability may get you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. Let's talk about the NAIA Champions of Character initiative on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it relates to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have two individuals who work at the NAIA National Office here in Kansas City, Missouri, Ms. Sarah Eckinger, who's the Director of Student Athlete Experience and Development, and Ms. Chesney Salee, who's the Vice President of Membership Value and Governance. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
First off, Sarah, I'll cue you here. Give us a little bit of background about yourself, about how long you've worked at the NAIA, kind of what your role is, and maybe some things you enjoy working at the NAIA.
Yeah, so I'm fairly new-ish. I guess I can't say I'm a rookie anymore. I've been here 3 years in July. So as you already stated, I'm the Director of Student Athlete Experience and Development. And so what I love about this position is it's taken everything in my professional career and rolled it all into one beautiful bow for me. And so I get to do some programming. I get to be in part of some really cool programs. Obviously, Champions of Character is one of them that I help oversee and implement for the association. But then I also get to be an advocate. So the biggest part of our department's role is really to be the voice for our student athletes and to really promote and help create the things that they would like to see throughout the NAIA.
Yeah. All right, Chesney, how about you? Let's give some background about yourself.
Yeah, I have been at the NAIA for 14 years now. I found my way here, going through school and then through law school. I kept kind of wondering, how could I work in college athletics? What would it be like to have a career? So I started here as a legal intern while I was still in law school, and then have just loved it so much that I never left. So I started in our legislative services area, basically all things rules and compliance. And then over time, just got more and more involved in different things as I got to know our members better, working with various groups and subsets of our membership, to the role that I'm in now, where I get to work with Sarah in Student Athlete Experience and Development. I still work with our legislative services area. I work with our Athletics Directors Association. And then I would say, as a whole, membership value is a concept we have in the NAIA about how do we make an individual staff member or coach's experience or an institution's experience in the NAIA so valuable and so helpful and meaningful that the NAIA is just the perfect spot for them. So thinking about that structurally and through the programs and services we offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is great. I'm really excited about this one. And a lot of the reason I wanted to do an episode just on the NAIA Champions of Character initiative, throughout the first couple seasons of the podcast, we mentioned Champions of Character, Champions of Character. We've never really had an episode where we define what actually is the Champions of Character. The purpose of this episode is to give some background on what the Champions of Character program is and some things that are going on here at the NAIA level that we can discuss, maybe some things coming up, maybe some background on how the program came to be. Obviously, this program has been around for 25 years now, launched in 2000, and I've talked to Rob Miller and some other individuals that were instrumental in getting this program started. But for those listeners that maybe aren't quite sure exactly what the NAIA Champions of Character is, give us a little background about the program and what it stands for and what the goals of the program are.
All right. Well, I'll start, and then Chesney can fill in any of the gaps. So, like you said, Champions of Character started back in 2000 as basically an initiative and a mission to help our student athletes and our coaches and our administrators grow not just in sports, but as in people in general. So that includes building strong character and then also living out our 5 core values, which are integrity, right? Knowing and doing what is right is our definition for that. Respect is also basically treating others the way you want to be treated. And then we have responsibility, which is embrace opportunities to contribute to the greater good, sportsmanship, bring your best to all competition, and then servant leadership, which is serve the common good.
And certainly in talking with folks like Rob Miller and Bruce Brown and others, there's such a legacy here with Champions of Character and certainly within the sort of specifics of the program. But I think it's really over time come to be our compass as an association and for many of our institutions, even without the Champions of Character terminology. It's how many of our institutions have been operating and guiding themselves for many, many years. And I think what is so special about it is it really embodies what I think of when I think about what is the NAIA and its role sort of within the intercollegiate athletics industry and landscape. And that within the NAIA, we think about athletics as being an opportunity for student athletes to, whether it's pursue a degree, and maybe it's the opportunity to go to college, maybe it's the funding they need to go to college,
right,
or maybe it's just that ability to keep pursuing a passion and a hobby and something they've loved for years while they're getting a degree and not have to step away from it quite yet. And yet that is all rolled into part of their entire educational experience. We think about it in the NAIA as being education-based athletics. And so athletics not only makes the student athlete experience more rewarding and well-rounded, but really becomes this great sort of microcosm of what I think our campuses are trying to do for all of their students, which is teach them and model for them what it looks like to be a leader, to be a character-driven person, how to treat others, and how to really be a contributing member of whatever various communities you're part of.
Yeah, and it definitely probably translates a little bit to the classroom as well. Absolutely. When you think about all these different core values, this isn't just something that helps you on the court, but it also, when teachers are interacting with students, hopefully they see this as well with these, having integrity in the classroom, just like on the court. Definitely some important things there. So launched in 2000, obviously it's been 25 years since it launched. There's obviously been some probably changes, how the program has evolved over the years. Tell me a little bit about some of the changes and some ways that the Champions of Character program has evolved to fit kind of the changing needs of college athletics and the NAIA as a whole.
Well, certainly when it first started, I think you get this concept, and you've heard some of that from Bruce and Rob in the past, of how we thought about the culture of sport at the time. And there was a real feeling, I think, that existed of something's got to change and there's a way to do this differently. So they came up with this concept of champions of character. But then once you have the concept, it's sort of like, okay, now how do we create the programming? So in those initial years, they really had to get active in and kind of taking on a road show to our institutions around the country of how do you introduce the concept and make it real and show its meaning and its importance to staff and administrators and certainly coaches at all of these institutions. So there was a lot of that kind of national outreach in those early years as the program was getting established as such a core component, not only of the NAIA at a national level, but really on a campus by campus level. Over time, that programming got more specific and sort of more detailed in terms of various resources and things along those lines. And I think at one point, even what we found was there was a real need for this. We were hearing from youth organizations and club sports and high school athletic associations. So at one point in time, we were working with several states on how to bring in this curriculum into what they were doing at a youth level. And while certainly I think there is a need and a place for this at all levels of sport, ultimately we started to hone it back in a little bit and narrow our focus, recognizing that ultimately our responsibility and priority is NAIA institutions and our student athletes. So really trying to make sure that we are delivering to the maximum ability we can to ensure that the program, its values, and its impact are felt by all NAIA student athletes across the country.
Yeah, and so while the heart of the program hasn't changed, which is the 5 core values, I think over the last 3 to 4 years, we put a lot of effort and emphasis from the NAIA to bring it back to the forefront for the association.
And we were talking before the podcast, Sarah, about how many schools there are now in the NAIA. And the number I looked up more recently is 237 institutions in the NAIA. Tell me about, maybe, is there some challenges with that, with having so many schools now in the NAIA compared to when it first started? What are some challenges with that, maybe?
Well, and our membership in the NAIA has certainly sort of changed numbers over the years, and as there's been various influences, and at points our membership numbered even higher than it is currently. But I think part of what we have found is that really honing into what is our identity and how does it serve institutions, we recognize the importance of that mission fit. So we talk about it in terms of champions of character, and we have institutions from public to private, from small to large, faith-based, non-faith-based, who all find their place in champions of character, and they might articulate it in slightly different ways in terms of how it fits kind of their campus mission or that type of thing. But we see that it is a real core component of our identity and part of why the institutions that are in the NAIA want to stay in the NAIA, and certainly a key point of why prospective member institutions want to engage with us. They recognize that portion of our identity, and sometimes, they tell us it's something that they feel like they have been missing. So it's certainly something that we are proud of. It does become a challenge in terms of how do you then deliver the programming, because we don't have direct access to the 84,000 student athletes across the NAIA. So we definitely have to work through our campus administrators and coaches. It's one reason why many years ago we created the Champions of Character Coaches programming, recognizing the really critical and vital role that coaches play in modeling, teaching, and shaping this behavior for student athletes.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that training is that it's required for all new NAIA coaches. So whether you transfer from an NAIA institution to another one, or whether you're brand new coming into the association, that's a required training that all coaches take. And we've had really great satisfaction rates and feedback from the coaches that go through that course, say that it was really valuable. It really helped them understand the Champions of Character program and the importance of that program in the NAIA. So that's been really successful, and we're really proud and excited about that training.
Yeah.
And when I think about that training, one thing that's really cool to me is that training has been required since about 2006 or so. It was really just this year, so in the fall of 2024, that we required any other sort of training for all coaches. We now require all coaches to go through some annual rules education training. But if you think about it, so for almost 20 years, as an association, this was determined in many ways by our membership, the most fundamental and critical thing that we thought every single coach who's engaging with student athletes, volunteer, volunteer or full-time, whatever they may be, it was understanding these 5 core values. So I think that's just a really cool example of just how critical and how important the Champions of Character program really pretty quickly became for us as an association, and that still holds true today.
Yeah. Let's talk about the impact of the program itself. I know a lot of times we think about the NAIA Champions of Character initiative. I've heard from several athletes, it's like, I might not have really took full advantage of this when I was in the middle of it, but I see now how important that was to learn those core values, integrity, respect. It helps me in the workplace, working with others, being a good teammate, things like that. So what are maybe some of the impact that you've seen, maybe some success stories from different schools where you've seen an immediate impact, or just something that's been done at the institutional level that has been a success story on the impact that the Champions of Character program has had?
I'll start with impact, and you kind of already alluded to it. What I love about the Champions of Character program is it gives student athletes language and a framework that they already care about and they're already trying to live out, but it gives them definitions and it gives them tangible and real life ways on how to live out those 5 core values. So that's one of the big pieces that I love about the Champions of Character program. And like you said, maybe not in the moment, maybe not in their time as a collegiate athlete, but later on in life, those core values, I think, really come back and are an important staple for those student athletes. So, and on any campus-wide level, we've seen programs shift and help shift their culture within their athletic department. So coaches lead differently, teams talk more openly about accountability and service, and we know that kind of environment shapes student athletes. And again, maybe it not be immediately, but it will probably be long after they walk off for their last game. And so those are really important things. I think some really cool success stories, and there's lots of them out there, whether that's watching teams at various competitions, opponents and home teams and visitors come together and do a prayer together before or after competition, even if it was a tough or contentious game, them still coming together. A few years ago, we had a really cool national story that got picked up by a local television about a couple softball teams where a softball player, she hit a home run. That was incredible, but right after she batted, she injured herself and could not round the bases. And her team can't touch her, otherwise the run won't count. So the other opposing team came, picked her up, and went base by base, so that way that run would count towards her home run. So just really incredible stories like that. And then I think we have the very quiet ways that we see that, and that's through servant leadership. So as Chesney kind of talked about, a lot of the 5 core values fit very beautifully in a lot of our institutions' mission and values through their schools. And so servant leadership is clearly a big one for a lot of our institutions, and obviously a very important core value for us as well. So we see hundreds of servant leadership projects done by our student athletes throughout the year, whether that's on their own campus, maybe it's them at a national championship. We do Teaming Up for Character, which is a servant leadership project at every national championship. So I think there's lots of great ways that we see the 5 core values and champions of character playing out on a regular basis.
I think Sarah hit it really well. And you do see these cool opportunities like the softball example Sarah brought up, because they happen on the field of play, and so the cameras are rolling, so you have a chance to capture it. And there's these other examples of students who call themselves on, a fault in volleyball or a mistake that they make in golf, and they're calling themselves even though no one else has caught it, because they have that integrity.
Yeah.
They have learned that, and they're risking a national championship or whatever it might be in that moment. Which those are really cool and impactful stories. But there's also so many of these other kind of these little moments, like Sarah said, that don't get captured on camera, so they don't get shared. But when you have the chance to see them or to hear about them, and they're the kind of things that our members that Sarah and I work with talk about kind of in passing. But when you stop to think about it, like the example of teams finish a baseball or a softball game and it's been contentious, they lose, and yet the team members are the ones picking up the trash in the dugout, even though they're the visiting team and they got to get on the bus and go 8 hours home or however long it is. And they're having respect for their surroundings and respect for their opponents in the game. And these sorts of things, like that doesn't happen everywhere. Right. There are plenty of situations where that doesn't happen with adults in the workplace or in your daily life. So I love that we have these little moments day in and day out where our student athletes are learning how to be model citizens of tomorrow and leaders in these quiet ways that I think is just really the heart of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think another way that we see it often play out and the impact is the culture that coaches are building within their teams or the athletic department, because we have a lot of institutions that will take one of the 5 core values and they focus on it for that whole month, right? And so they talk about different ways. What does that look like? Our coaches are modeling that behavior as well. Same with our administrators. And so again, to create that culture is really impactful. And while we love some education and some of those one and done stuff, we know that culture building is really what is going to be the intentional parts to champions of character and what's going to make that lasting impact. And we have schools that have award ceremonies at the end of every year, and normally the biggest award is normally their champions of character award. And again, I think that speaks to what our schools are really valuing about their student athletes.
Yeah, and you make a good point that the big award at Freed-Hardeman is called the Heart of a Lion Award, and it's not even who had the best stats that year. The big award they do at the very end is the Heart of a Lion Award, and it is to the athlete that best exemplified the core values. And you also make a good point about how a lot of these schools that are in the NAIA, this is ingrained in their mission already. So it's just incorporating these different things with athletics that probably reinforce a lot of what the school's wanting to do already. And I know that's true at Freed-Hardeman. An interesting story at Freed-Hardeman was just 3 years ago, they started a program called University Servants Day. And a lot of the students that went to Freed-Hardeman, this was a campus-wide event. You're out of school for you don't have any classes that day, and you just go and do a community service project with your social club or whatever it is that you want to do. And a lot of the students didn't know, like, what do we do? I don't they left it up to us what we do. And a lot of the athletes were like, well, we do this all the time. Like, we can show you what to do. Like, we do this all the time as part of athletics. So it was an interesting, because, a lot of times athletes sometimes don't always feel a part of the culture of the school because they're kind of separated a lot, doing their own thing. But that was an opportunity that they could actually show others how to do some of these things, because it's ingrained in what they do as a team, as a mission of the athletic department. And it's very true. A lot of these schools are trying to incorporate a lot of these things that athletics has done for a long time now.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Very interesting there. And tell us a little bit about the benchmarks. I know this is something that people that they're probably familiar with the NAIA Champions of Character, but they might see something on somebody's website that says we're a gold star institution, and they might not know exactly what all that means. So tell me a little bit about the benchmarks, how a school achieves certain status as far as gold, silver, or bronze, and what kind of makes up what that is.
So originally it was called the scorecard, and now it's been revamped and now called the core report. And really the core report is our assessment tool for how schools are implementing and promoting the Champions of Character program. We have a Champions of Character advisory committee, and they work very hard to continue to revamp and energize and promote the Champions of Character program. So one of the things that they've done over the last couple of years is take a hard look at the scorecard, now called the core report. So I'll refer to it as core report. Moving on.
Branding,
So the core report, because again, originally it was feeling like a check the box or punitive measurement, and that's not what the committee or the NAIA wants Champions of Character to be about. And so the revamp really took the core report and made it more of a something to celebrate and for schools to really tout and promote what they're doing on their campuses. So the core report really has 7 different sections to it. So the big pieces are promotions of Champions of Character, training and education that they're doing on campus, not for just student athletes, but also coaches and administrators as well. What are they doing to teach the 5 core values? So what are you doing around respect, integrity, all the others? There's a separate section just for servant leadership, because that is a big one on a lot of our institutions. And so they do a lot of stuff. So we do have a separate category just for that one. And then ejections is, I would say, the one punitive piece to the scorecard core report. And basically, if an institution, there's 3 different categories for ejections that would fall towards the core report. So dissent to an official, derogatory language, and fighting. Those are really the 3 ejections that count towards the core report. And what happens is when an official puts in that ejection, it automatically is triggered if it's something that goes towards the core report, and it dings them saying that they need to basically create what we call a teachable moment. And those are just options for, I guess, if you want to say restorative justice, for them to come back and really share, I learned the lesson from this. This is, how I'm going to make this right as I move forward, as whether that's the student athlete or the coach. So it doesn't matter who get the ejection. So institutions can have up to 6 ejections or 5 ejections, and then the 6th one, you don't get any points for that. But you can submit a teachable moment for those other 5 and redeem your points back. So it is punitive, but not. There's an option for student athletes and coaches to really learn their lesson and get those points back. And then the last one is just if there's any NAIA code of ethics violations. And so that brings you to the 3 designations for being a 5-star institution. You can be gold, silver, or bronze, and that's based off the points from the core report. And then we have perfect scores institutions, which is still gold, but you're also considered a perfect score if you have 100 points. And then conferences can also earn the distinction of being a 5-star conference. As long as 60% of the schools within that conference are also 5-star institutions, then that conference also gets to tout that they're a 5-star conference. So this is a really big deal to a lot of our institutions. They put that in their email stuff. They put out newsletters. They put out press releases. So our institutions really value the importance of being a 5-star institution. And again, I think that speaks a lot to what they care about as an institution as well.
Yeah, and it's not something that's thrown around. There's a lot that they have to do to earn this. And I'm just thinking about sports that I watch. It's very hard to go a whole season and not get mad. And there's ejections that happen. And as you said, there's things you can do to show that you're improving on that. But it's an impressive feat to be able to say that all of our athletes, we didn't have anybody get thrown out, and it just shows that it's an intentional effort at each of the institutions, both at the coaching level and teaching their players. Let's talk about some challenges we talked about some challenges with the number of schools and things like that. I was talking to Christian Gillette at Park University for a previous episode, and we talked about a few of the challenges that athletic directors are kind of dealing with right now with NIL and different things where you may player commitment, team culture, and things like that, the challenges associated with that. Let's talk about some challenges maybe at the national level in character development in collegiate athletes today. Teaching that, trying to get the schools to buy into that. What are some challenges that you all have seen at the institutional level from working with them?
Well, I'll kick us off here, as it sounds like some of my thoughts may align a little bit with Kristen Gillette, but I think about in this day and age of college athletics, our industry is going through evolution like we've never really seen before. And so you take the combination of all of these things, whether it's NIL, both kind of in the way NIL was intended to be, as well as in the multi-million-dollar pay-for-play kind of NIL, and you take social media and the visibility that creates, and this kind of culture of self-promotion and comparison, and as also things like rule changes and things along those lines that have kind of ushered in this era of student athletes being able to transfer pretty freely, but that includes transferring kind of repeatedly or frequently to chase more playing time or to chase more money or whatever it is. You take the combination of all of these things, and I think what you're left with can be an absence of what feels like true role models, or role models who sort of have the priorities that I think, as parents, we would want to teach and instill in our children. And knowing that athletes have always been looked at as role models for little kids and all of that sort of thing. But in the college space, I think what that means is it can create an impression for, let's just say high school or youth student athletes of what they are supposed to be or what they are supposed to want in a college athletic experience. And I think that NAIA is something different. I think that NAIA, we use this phrase like education-based athletics or these other sorts of things, but are trying to place the emphasis and the priority back on these values and being value-based. And yes, athletics is great and we should strive to win and all of these things. And you should strive if you want recognition, if you want to succeed, if you want to sort of be the best, win the championship, all of those things, yes, but you can do it with the right values at the same time. And so I think in the NAIA, Champions of Character really is this leader in our space that creates this opportunity to place the right priorities on these other components, like certainly our core values, but how that shows up in terms of accountability and humility and treating others and yourself and the game with respect.
Yeah. Sarah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, too, we know our coaches and administrators have a lot on their plate. They are pulled in a million different ways. And so I know sometimes saying, okay, this is one more thing I need to do, and sometimes might become a check the box kind of deal, which is fair. But, when you're building it into your culture, it doesn't have to be hard, but it obviously does have to be very intentional in order for it to have the impact and for you to see the fruits of your labor, years down the road. But I definitely think, we know our administrators, we know our coaches, we know everybody's very busy. And so we want to make sure that we're helping through those challenges and making sure that implementing, providing resources, options, what that can look like on a regular basis, in tangible, implementable ways, is really important to our institutions as well. So we want to make sure that it might be seen as a challenge or hard to implement, but we're really doing our best to make sure that that's less of a burden for them.
Yeah. And I think from our end, part of the challenge, like we referenced before, is the fact that we can't directly work with all of our student athletes, but that also means we can't directly work with every single coach and those sorts of things. So it can be a challenge because it is not cookie cutter. Every institution is different. Their resources and abilities and partnerships and all of those sorts of things, it looks different on every single one of our campuses. Right. So it is difficult to say, here is how to do Champions of Character perfectly, or here is the best way, because there's not just one best way. But one of the things that I think is cool that Sarah has really ushered in recent years is the new core report helps us to do this as well, is really identifying some of those various best practices or things that have really worked well for various institutions. And we have a site kind of on a member site called a learning hub where we're able to share these best practices and these different ideas. What is working for one institution? It doesn't have to work for everybody else, but this is certainly a space where I see our members really wanting to be collaborative. There is not a pride of ownership. There's not a competitive thing here. It's sort of like, hey, the more we can all be better at things like Champions of Character, the better it makes our whole association and every single one of our student athletes' experiences during their 4 years in the NAIA. So I love the collaboration and the willingness to really reach out a hand and help one another that I see amongst our coaches and administrators.
Yeah, transition perfectly into the next question I was wanting to ask you. first off talking about how different each NAIA school is based on the size that they are, the area that they are in. So it sometimes causes schools to have to be a little creative in how they implement some of these programs, because a school here in Kansas City might implement it differently than a school in Henderson, Tennessee, where Freed Hardeman is, for example. So maybe let's talk about some of the creative ways and effective approaches that schools have used to bring some of these values to life. I'm sure you have heard some stories about, I was talking to Kristen yesterday, and one of the things she mentioned when they talk about the champions of character that I thought was really interesting, and it was kind of a cool way they did it. They brought the fire department in, and they had them like carry each of their teammates on like a gurney, and they had them do the hose, and it's like saw how difficult that was, teaching them to kind of look out for each other. But it was this like unique way they did that. Any creative ways that you've seen some schools do this? Maybe some things you saw on the Learning Hub that people have put on there on how they bring these values to life.
Yeah, again, there's lots of cool ones out there. So we have institutions that will basically have peer mentors that are the ones that are educating and teaching the Champions of Character program. They'll come together, they'll meet for an hour so many times throughout the academic year, and really talk about how they're going to promote the 5 core values. What are they going to do? What kind of activities or education they're going to do? We see a lot of teams, like I said, coaches will pick a core value and they focus on that for however much time. And again, they talk about what that looks like on the field. They talk about what that looks like with their teammates in the classroom. So they're building that culture within teams or throughout the athletic department. Some of them will do competitions around Champions of Character as well. And so what team is doing more servant leadership projects, and they get so many points for that. And then at the end, maybe they win a cup or something. So I think there's lots of different ways. We have lots of schools that will, at the beginning, day one, from student athlete orientation, their messaging is all around Champions of Character, and then they continue that messaging throughout the year. They will do specific games. So LSU Shreveport, they do a Champions of Character basketball game where the men's basketball team brings in basically all the local elementary kids, and that's the whole audience for the game. And at halftime, they do a Champions of Character talk to those youth that come to the game, and it's a big deal there. And so just lots of cool ways that our institutions are doing it, and doing it in ways that make sense for them and feels true to who they are as an institution.
Yeah.
And like Sarah said, there's so many examples that might happen within a given team or even the athletics department as a whole. But I think there's also cool examples that happen within the university campus as a whole, and examples where it goes back to this concept of mission fit that we were talking about. But sometimes we hear about Champions of Character being incorporated into academic curriculum, which I think makes a lot of sense of when you really want to ingrain and instill values, being able to show how these values show up and can be implemented or learned about in a bunch of different settings. So different opportunities to kind of build it into curriculum or other things like that, as well as create spaces for student athletes to really kind of lean into some of this. So there are examples, and every year when we get National Champions of Character Student Athlete Award nominees and we get to read through those submissions, you see so many cool examples of how this happens and where the student athletes are really taking what probably started their freshman year as an example of just learning some of the values, and they've really taken it to heart over their time on campus. And they're building it into independent study coursework. Or we have a former student athlete who really created an entire mental health component and service on her campus and created an entire program around this that now sort of has lasted beyond her time as a student athlete and is continuing to serve all of these student athletes who come after her. There's plenty of examples like that I think are just ways in which Champions of Character really takes off and takes life beyond just this interaction of exactly what happens on the field.
Champions of Character started back in 2000, 25 years. We talked about how it's evolved throughout that time. What are some things that are coming up maybe in the next few years that the NAIA is working on for their institutions? Yeah,
like I said, the incredible work of the Champions of Character Advisory Committee, they have worked really hard over the last 3-4 years to really modernize and re-energize the Champions of Character program. So lots of big projects that they have done over the few years. So obviously the revamp of the core report. We have a brand new, beautiful Champions of Character logo as well. They've updated websites for the Champions of Character web pages and went through that grueling work of looking through all of those things and updating those components as well. We've created Champions of Character commercials. They've updated all the PA announcements, and we even have video components to those PA announcements to really promote. And those can be used in game, in arena, but also for streaming events for institutions that are live streaming their competition as well. So we updated the Champions of Character coaches course, as we kind of talked about. So 3 years ago, we did a huge revamp, and I think it better reflects today's coaching environment for our coaches. And again, we've had really positive feedback. Some of the new additions were the School of Character Award that we implemented last year, with Carroll College being the inaugural School of Character. That was a huge success. We've heard so much great feedback from our institutions saying they want to be the next one. So even though Carroll said they're going to go for round 2 and be back to back. So we're really excited for that. So that will be released again this September, along with all the other national winners. So we're really excited about that. As you talked about, the 25-year anniversary. So this fall we'll have some exciting and cool programming going out about the 25-year anniversary of Champions of Character. We're also partnering with Officially Human to add in some components to the Coach of Character course, specifically talking about how coaches can basically support officials during competition and really model some of that behavior that we're looking for from our coaches and our student athletes. So we're really excited for that collaboration as well.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. You were talking about Carol wanting to go back to back. I was like, if you really want to get people involved in the Champions of Character, just make it a competition, and we can. Everybody will be on board with that for sure. So tell us a little bit about if people want to know. I think all the coaches that probably are listening know a lot about these resources probably already. But for listeners that maybe aren't familiar with the program, where's they can find some more information about the program, websites, any materials out there that they can find out more about it?
Yeah, so anybody can go to the NAIA website, type in Champions of Character into the search toolbar, and a plethora of information is going to pop up for you. So we have all of our materials are out there. There's nothing hidden or shied away from for just anybody. So it doesn't matter if you're a high school coach or whatever, that information is available to you. So we have the 5 core values, the definitions, we have talking points, we have PA readings, we have all those resources are listed on our website, and they are available to anybody. And I would just say for our student athletes, a big piece is just starting to live the 5 core values, both on and off the field. Obviously, how you treat teammates, how you treat officials and coaches, and how you respond. Those are big deals. For our coaches, they can intentionally build these values into their culture for their athletics teams, and then through everyday conversations and, of course, their own actions. And I would say for all of our fans out there, how you can live Champions of Character and the 5 core values is really how you show up, right? How you show up for the individuals that you're cheering for. So cheering with class, supporting your student athletes beyond just their stats, and really encouraging a positive environment at any competition that you're going to, and really modeling college athletics the way it should be.
And I would just add to that of, if you're not in the NAI community right now, but you're interested in this and you want to know what it's like, you want to get a little bit of a taste of Champions of Character, in addition to going to our website and being able to kind of learn more, read more, see more, go see one of our institutions, show up at a game and see what it's like on an NAI campus or at an NAI contest. Follow some of their social media accounts. If you have youth athletes at home, send them to a summer camp that's being offered for youth, and you'll get a sense. My bet is you will get a sense of what Champions of Character sort of looks like, and what it's like to be coached by a coach who understands these values and embodies them. And you'll see a difference, because yes, it's about getting better at your sport, and it's about being competitive and winning and all of those things, but it's about doing it the right way. And so really it's not something you can just say. It's something that you have to show up and live, and it's part of your culture. And so the best way to experience that is to, start to witness this, start to pay attention.
Right.
Whether that's virtually via social media or whatever else, or it's if you have the opportunity, go to an NAI game. And my hope is that you'll see a bit of what this is
and
really
you'll be
like.
Entertained to a lot of talented teams that you'll see. and the
100%.
PA person will read the Champions of Character read before the game. So even if you don't know anything about it, you'll hear the 5 core values read, and how they're trying to, live their life, play the game, all of that. So you're kind of, subconsciously exposed to it without even probably realizing. If you go to an NAIA game, you're going to hear about those core values early on in the contest for sure. Also on the NAIA website, naia.org/champions of character, there's actually a link to this podcast. So if you want to listen, there's a link to the Spotify page for the Playing with a Purpose podcast. I really appreciate you all helping me promote that. Some of the information that I put out, you can find a link on it there as well. So I appreciate you all helping me with that. Anything else that we didn't get to that y'all can think of that you wanted to share that we maybe didn't get to?
The only last thing I would say is if we've got anybody out there listening who wants to know more about Champions of Character, whether you're in the NAIA or you're not, you can also always feel free to reach out to myself or to Sarah. We're happy to share information, share resources. I think across the board, our goal is how to help sort of today's young people become tomorrow's leaders and do that through sport and embodying these 5 core values that we certainly believe in so much and that through our institutions and thousands of student athletes we have heard have really withstood the test of time. So anything we can do to help or to share information about that, we're more than happy to do so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'll put your names in the show notes. So if there's any questions, and we can put your email if we need to as well, if there's any questions from our listeners about the Champions of Character program. Well, I really appreciate y'all's time today, hospitality, and having me in.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Sarah Eckinger and Chesney Salee for being my guests this week. Be sure to listen to this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also catch the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Freed-Hardeman Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join me for our next episode as I talk with former Freed-Hardeman Athletic Director Mr. Mike McCutcheon on the topic of life after athletics. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.